Can a Rebbe make a mistake?
The one-word answer to the question is no. Now, I know that sounds unreasonable, and it also suggests an Indian that you are arguably not allowed to attribute to a creation, to a basa adam, as opposed to the Meibish Nalein. But the short answer to the question is no. And there's kama v'kama pratim, there's a couple of stories that help illustrate it. So first of all, it says in Likutei Deburim, this hamoyden dikavod. And I've shared this with you many times in the past, I believe, that the Rabbi Isaac Homler said, and the Rabbi Isaac Homler said was the Rabbi Isaac Homler, but the Frierdiker Rebbe repeats it. The Frierdiker Rebbe repeats it by Eisel's Avart, it becomes the Rebbe's Avart. That Adam Rishon was not a Rebbe. The Raya that Adam Rishon was not a Rebbe, that he was able to make a mistake, was able to do an Aveda. Had Adam Rishon been a Rebbe, there was no way he could have made a mistake. And the question, of course, becomes, how could you say Adam Rishon was not a Rebbe? He was the Neshama Hachi Klaus. The Neshama of Adam Rishon is the Neshama Klaus of all the Neshamas Klaus. Every Neshama till Mashiach is included in Adam Rishon. How could you say Adam Rishon was not a Rebbe? The Teretz is Poshet. He didn't have the Sheish Meyes Elef Ragli Ho Masher Anechi Bekirbe. He had a great Neshama, but he didn't have a flock, he didn't have an aid, he didn't have a sheep to shepherd. And the Meile of a Rebbe is the koyach that he gets from chassidim. Farana Meise mit dem Tzemach Tzedek and the Mittel Rebbe. What's the Meise? The Meise is as follows. That when the Mittel Rebbe became a Rebbe, the Tzemach Tzedek moved away. Tzemach Tzedek was very, very close to the Alter Rebbe, to his Rebbe. But he was not so chassidik, it says in the Rebbe's Rishimis, to the Mittel Rebbe. When the Mittel Rebbe became a Rebbe and he moved back to Lubavitcher, I think he moved to Kremenchuk. It says where he moved. And the reason he did that was because he didn't want to be around the chassid of his father-in-law, the Rebbe, the Mittel Rebbe, because he would not be able to learn and daven. He'd be distracted by all kinds of things, Fabrengen, Mamorim, Yechidis, and so on. So the Mittel Rebbe called him, wrote him a letter, and begged him to come live in Lubavitcher. And he promised him that if he agrees to live in Lubavitcher, he will not bother him at all. He'll be able to sit and learn and daven. Lepel, the last few years of the Mittel Rebbe's life, Mittel Rebbe was ill. And it says in one place in the Likutei Deburim that the last years of the Mittel Rebbe's life was Shnei Melachim Mishtamishim B'Keser Echad. Amos Tetechet Farkert, as we'll get to on a different occasion. But I saw in one place in the Likutei Deburim it says that. But in the beginning, when the Mittel Rebbe was healthy, the Tzemach Tzedek wasn't bothered except for one thing. The one thing that Mittel Rebbe asked the Tzemach Tzedek to do was to write the Tshuvas and Nigla. People used to ask Shalos and Halacha. Alter Rebbe used to answer himself. Tzemach Tzedek answered, the Rebbe Marash answered, and so on. The Rebbe Rashab used to answer such Tshuvas. The Mittel Rebbe said he doesn't have time, because his whole cheshik, his whole geschmack, his whole koch, is as zwei junge Leute treffen sich, soll man reden Yechudei Allah. When two young men meet, they talk about chassidus, alakus, achdas avaye, Yechudei Allah. So the Tshuvas and Nigla, the Tzemach Tzedek wrote. Who was his chavruse? Agon Adir Ibn Nechemya de Brovne. He was a famous chassid, and he was a young man and a big Talmud Chacham, and he and Tzemach Tzedek were chavruses. And when the Shailis to come to the Mittel Rebbe, he would send them to the two of them. And the Seder was that after they wrote up the Tshuva, the research, they wrote it up, they'd bring it back to the Mittel Rebbe, and he would read it, and then they would send it. In all their experience, the Tzemach Tzedek found that the Mittel Rebbe never made a correction, never, ever made a correction. So one day there was a tshuva, which was an emergency, it was urgent, and the Mittel Rebbe was not available. So Tzemach Tzedek made a cheshbon. I've written dozens of tshuvas, maybe hundreds of tshuvas. And in all of those, the Mittel Rebbe never once made a correction. What I wrote, why would he make a correction now? And it's an emergency after all, so he sent it off, thinking that the next day or the day after, when the Mittel Rebbe become more available, he'll be able to show him the tshuva. When he showed him the tshuva, the Mittel Rebbe told him, "Those fazen atesvis, you forgot atesvis mefereshes in a certain place in Shas." It took the Tzemach Tzedek a little while to figure out what his father-in-law, the Mittel Rebbe, was talking about, but he was very, very upset. He was ashamed. How could he have made such a mistake? So the Mittel Rebbe told the Tzemach Tzedek, in order to console him, quote, "Sorg sich nicht, du bist noch nicht kein Rebbe." Don't feel bad, you're not a Rebbe yet. In other words, indicating and implying that a Rebbe, once he's Eilal Kasa Nesiyas, he becomes a Rebbe Nesi B'Yisrael, the Chassidim hold him. He can't make a mistake. And of course, the story with the Tzemach Tzedek Alein, that chassidim came to the Tzemach Tzedek in the later years when he was ill. One had a problem with a putitz. He was a landowner, a goy, and he owed him money and he couldn't pay it. And the landowner was going to throw him into a pit. And he would starve him, his wife, his children. He came to the Tzemach Tzedek, what should I do? And another one had a physical ailment, a sickness. Something was wrong with him. So two chassidim came the same day. The Tzemach Tzedek told his shamish to write each one of them an answer. To the one who had a problem with a putitz, he told Shtel and Bankis he should put leeches or bloodsuckers to draw blood. There's an old practice of bloodletting. And to the one who had problems with an illness, he told him to go to a putitz, to a rich guy who lived hundreds of miles away. When the answers came out, the two chassidim looked at the answers, looked at each other, and said, "It's obviously a mistake. The one who's chassid, who's sick, should put leeches. And the one who has problem with his landlord should go to a putitz. Why does it help the chassid who has problem with his landlord to put leeches? Why does it help the chassid who has a medical problem to go to this putitz?" So the Maril, the Tzemach Tzedek's second son, overheard their suffix, and he says, "Petach bam taten is nechayches ken grais, fools. By my father, it's impossible there should be an error." So they went home. So the chassid who had a problem with the putitz put bankis, and in a day or two, he looked like a bloody mess. The putitz sent people to his house to schlep him to the palace. And they see that the guy's a mess. He's beaten up. He has blood oozing out of 100 places in his body. They put him on a stretcher. They carry him to the putitz. He comes into the putitz. The putitz looks at him and says, "Moshke, what happened to you?" He says, "What happened to me? I was finally able to get together the money I owe you," he tells him. And I was on my way to the palace, and I was jumped by a bunch of goyim. They beat the daylights out of me. They stole my money, and now I don't have any money, and I don't have any illness. I'm so sick. The putitz had such rachmanas on him. He said, "You know what? I'll help you with your medicine." And he forgave him his debt, and he gave him a shtickle side free rent. And they saw mamash gili alukus. The other person with a medical issue came to that putitz, and as he arrived, it turned out that the putitz had the exact same illness. And they brought a doctor from overseas, a specialist, to heal him. And he managed to get an appointment by this doctor, which that's also a story unto itself, that he should be healed. And they saw clearly by Rebbe Nechachas Kagrais. There is, from the Rebbe, from our Rebbe, two unbelievably powerful comments that shed some complexity on the aforementioned. And I'm going to repeat them here. The first was a comment that Rabbi made to a yid by the name of Rabbi Avram Sefer. Avram Sefer was an Einkel of the Chassam Sefer. He was a Goan Oilam, a Goan Adir. He was a bit of a modern man. The Rebbe knew. He lived in New York for many years. And he was frequenting the Rebbe. He would come into the Rebbe anytime he wanted. The Rebbe would let him in. And he would talk and learning. So, Rabbi Avram Sefer, I think I saw this in the Sefer, Shemen Sosan Mechaverecha from Rav Shalber Vopos, Agazun Zayin on the Erech Samach Sefer. Printed the Tzemach Tzedek's Sfarim. I'm sorry, the Chassam Sefer Sfarim Zayda. He'd bring him to the Rebbe. He was very mishtoimim. He was overwhelmed by the Rebbe's Yediyah and the Chassam Sefer's Sfarim. Once he brought the Rebbe a very, very interesting kuntres, a pamphlet. He found the pirush of the Chassam Sefer on Shas, on the Gemara. But the Chassam Sefer never wrote a pirush on Shas. What it was a list of pieces in Gemara and where to find commentary in the various other Svarim of the Chassam Sefer, the Chuvas and the Agada and the Chumash and so on. So when he published this Sefer, he had this manuscript and he printed it out. And only a certain percentage was able to ascertain what his grandfather is referring to, so he left it blank. He brought the Rebbe the Sefer, the Rebbe opens it up and starts reading from the first entry, and each entry he goes through, he tells him exactly where to find it in the Chassam Sefer Svarim. And he was just blown away. He's an Einukel, he's the grandson of the Chassam Sefer, and he's a Goan Elam. And he has trouble recalling it. The Rebbe Hazeh knows each source where it is. So he tells the Rebbe with greatest pilot, Lubavitcher Rebbe, Hazeh, Kenter Hazeh feel, how do you know so much? So the Rebbe tells him, that's the Alts from the Keich, was chassidim given me. This is the Keiches that I get from chassidim, which is why we say a Rebbe cannot make a mistake, because the greatness of a Rebbe is the Keiches that he gets from the chassidim, from the Kohol, from the community, from the Am. Shalom Alpa writes, when he was a Bach in Yeshiva, the Rebbe once walked out to Mincha, arm in arm with the Avram Sefer. And as they walked by, the Avram Sefer turned to the Bachim and said, Ich bin echt dem Rebbe Chassid. He was just overwhelmed. And the second story, the story of Yankel Hecht, over Shalom Zachin Rachab Yankel Hecht, J.J. Hecht, that he was by the Rebbe, and he told the Rebbe, I think I heard it from him directly. He said, I told the Rebbe, I have no rachmanis. The Rebbe had a very, very difficult time in the 80s with misnagdim and so on. He says, if the Rebbe wants, he could be masalik the misnagdim in a second, snap his fingers, run his hand across the forehead. And if the Rebbe chooses to suffer, he doesn't have to worry about it. So the Rebbe looked at him, and the Rebbe told him, I only have as much strength as the chassidim give me. So this is an answer to a question with some parpedois.